All right. Well, good afternoon. My name is Andy Myers. I'm an associate professor of civil and environmental engineering here at Northeastern University, and it is my honor to welcome you to the first in-person NOWRDC Symposium. I'm thankful very much for all of your attendance, for taking the time to spend the afternoon and tomorrow with us, as well as to all the many virtual participants. I understand we have 400 folks online participating in this event today, so it was a vibrant event. We had to turn people away, and it's one of those good problems to have when you have a lot of interest. Here at Northeastern, we have been longtime advocates of the offshore wind energy industry. We see it as vital to the energy landscape of the United States moving forward, and it is our honor to host this event for these next 2 days. As with any of these events, there is a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into pulling these off, and today's event is no exception. So I'd like to thank two people in particular. First is Corey Groenfeld, I'm program manager here at NOWRDC, as well as Kimberline Toussaint, an events coordinator here at the College of Engineering at Northeastern. So can we join in a round of applause to thank them? So I have been collaborating with many folks in this room, and I know many of you have all been collaborating together for over a decade. It has been a wild ride seeing this industry grow and launch into something very significant. As part of that time was the origination of this idea of a Department of Energy funded consortium that organizes research in offshore wind at the national level. And so seeing that idea start from a concept into how it's materialized today is very, very gratifying. And I am so proud to see that NOWRDC has become a key catalyst in launching what is sure to become an important industry here in the United States. I can see firsthand how they have amplified and expanded the collaborations that I've been a part of, and I'm sure the collaborations that you have been a part of as well. So I want to thank NOWRDC. I want to thank NOWRDC's leadership. For the past few years, that leadership has been under Carrie Hitt, and now under the leadership of Kevin Knobloch. So it is my pleasure now to introduce Kevin. So Kevin is the acting executive director of NOWRDC. He is also the president of a consulting company called Knobloch Energy. He is a longtime advocate for all things related to climate issues. In the second Obama administration, he was the chief of staff of the US Department of Energy, and before that, he served for 10 years as the president of the Union of Concerned Scientists. So with that, please join me in welcoming Kevin Knobloch.
Thank you so much, Andy, and thank you to Northeastern for hosting us so wonderfully. We're so excited about the next couple of days, and we're so pleased that all of you are with us and going to really help create this as a gathering of sharing and idea generation and helping sort out how best to move forward in the offshore wind innovation space. This is our third annual symposium that the National Offshore Wind Research and Development Consortium is convening. The first two were virtual for obvious reasons, so we couldn't be more excited to have this hybrid. I think we have 100 plus of you in person. We have 450 connecting virtually, and welcome to all of you who will be connected via live stream. I think we all appreciate that this symposium comes at a really critical time. I know we always say that, it's a critical time. Well, this is a critical time in the offshore wind industry. And we think it's really vitally important that those of you working on the industry challenges, including the 52 project teams that have received funding from the consortium competitive solicitation grant processes so far, connect and share ideas. And I don't think we can overstate the challenges that are in front of us. We have very ambitious policy goals. We have a national target of 30 gigawatts by 2030. DOE is increasingly talking about 110 gigawatts and beyond by 2050. And of course, that's not counting all of the global ambitions. The sense of urgency is intense. The timeline for deploying all of this capacity is demanding. And much of what we aim to do, moving into a floating wind, or even more demanding systems integration and management, or coordinated planned transmission infrastructure. This simply hasn't been done at scale before. You know, you think about even 30 gigawatts by 2030. When was the last time that we brought that much new energy and electricity and injected into our system? The closest parallel I can think of is the buildup of our commercial nuclear reactors in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s. But that was a different kettle of fish altogether. So for the consortium, this gathering symposium comes at a moment when we're hitting full stride. And Andy didn't mention that I came in as acting executive director, and Carrie left to take her new role at Equinor at the request of the board to help bridge until we hire a new executive director. I had been a board member of NOWRDC prior to that when I worked at Embarrack. And I'm pleased to say that we have made an offer, and it's been accepted for a new executive director. I can't tell you who yet because we're coordinating the announcement, but that'll come on Friday. And could not be more excited. You're going to be delighted when you learn who is taking on this leadership role. As a reward for my coming in as acting, the board voted me onto the board. So I'll be staying on in that capacity, and gladly so. So I just want to quickly show you a few slides about, I want to click on the right one. Are we up? No. Here we go. So you may appreciate that we were formed back in 2018 when the U.S. Department of Energy put out a competitive funding opportunity announcement for consortia to compete for the privilege of creating this new nonprofit offshore wind research and development consortium. DOE brought $20.5 million to it. NYSERDA led a group that landed that award, and they matched that funding. So that original $41 million was basically our core to be able to run these competitive solicitations. Since we formed, we now have actually 7 members. We have a new member, the state member we'll announce shortly, 11 developers, 9 other public and independent members have joined the consortium. And our mission really has been to fund and advance R&D and innovation in the offshore wind space to basically help reduce the levelized cost of the offshore wind, to eliminate barriers to a rapid deployment. The core work of this organization over the last 3 years has been to design and run these competitive solicitations that have led to funding the 52 projects that are almost all in flight. A handful have concluded some of the earlier awards, but the rest of them are in flight in very exciting stages. We've also become a real center of a network across the entire sector. In the research community, the national labs, the tier 1, tier 2 supply chain companies, the wind developers, and federal and state agency leads. And this slide just gives you a sense of sort of the top shelf and very broad and deep membership that we have. Any organization or company that joins NOWRDC gets a seat on the board, and so you get a nice sense of this very cool board that we have. We're kind of lean and nimble. We have an executive director. We have 4 program managers, and you see them all here. They're extremely talented, and they get an enormous amount done. This is just a slide to showcase the funds that we've put on the street. 3 competitive solicitations, some multiple rounds, 52 project awards. That's $34 million in core R&D grant funding from the Department of Energy and NYSERDA, and that has leveraged another almost $10 million in cost share from project partners. Quick look at how that funding has cut across some of the challenge verticals. And you can see the interest that has come in. It's almost like a pulse of what folks in the industry and the research community feel is needed. The awards have really been geographically diverse. You would think that it might congregate on the coast, but not at all. And you see from this mix that the engineering and the systems management and other kinds of talent spread across the country. And this gives you a sense of large businesses, small businesses. When we were at DOE, there was always a big emphasis in the Small Business Administration on get more work to small businesses, and I was thrilled to see this particular pie chart division. And then you can see that we have several national labs. NREL is the big dog, at least in this space, but you'll also see Pacific Northwest and Sandia. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide other than to say that the level of engagement in our work is phenomenal. Each one of those 52 projects has a project advisory board. Predominantly, I think, technical people from across the sector, the research community and the industry. We've been building this great database. We have this symposium. We also have been developing the offshore wind research and development roadmap. We're working on version 4.0 now. This is a chance that any of you have to help shape the focus not only of our organization, but we know that the Department of Energy, we know that the state energy offices and the wind developers all pay attention to what we working with you identify as the biggest R&D needs and problems to take on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think, Corey, we can probably post this deck for people to look at. But one of the things we've been doing is, over the last, under Carrie's leadership it started, and we've continued, is developing, we call them special projects, but that's not a particular satisfying moniker for them, but different ways of working on our mission with different kinds of partners and candidly, different kinds of revenue streams. This is one that's particularly fun, that a group called Innovate UK that brings British money, government money to the table for R&D innovation grants. We're working up what will be 2 parallel solicitations to really leverage those dollars. More to come on that. So, with that, just a final word, and then I'm eager to introduce our keynote speakers. When we think about what we can achieve here over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, our hope is that all of you will learn from each other, that you'll share what you're working on to the offshore wind industry. You'll get feedback from the broader industry and research community. And increasingly, we're eager to be able to convey the ways in which your vital work will remove barriers to the rapid deployment of offshore wind, reduce the cost of this energy, minimize harmful impacts to endangered marine species, commercial fisheries, and ocean and coastal environments. We really need to take that extra step of harvesting what we're learning collectively and individually and translating and communicating that out to the broader world. That's where a lot of the excitement comes in. And because our research work is funded with public dollars at the federal and state level, there's candidly an obligation to be transparent and to do this piece of work. We're sensitive to protecting IP, of course, as appropriate. But the spirit of all of this work is to share this information for the entire industry, for the entire research community, ultimately for countries around the world, to get this major climate solution accelerated and deployed as quickly as we can. Heartfelt thanks to our host, Northeastern University, to our core funders, our industry and state members, our hardworking PIs in all of the projects, and all of you that are here today and online. It is now my great honor and pleasure to introduce one of our keynote speakers, former U.S. Representative Joseph P. Kennedy III. Congressman Kennedy has dedicated his career to social and economic justice and I would say clean energy and climate change, which I think can fit under that umbrella, increasingly so. As a U.S. Representative for Massachusetts' 4th Congressional District from 2013 to 2021, he ran for office to tackle the systematic inequities from healthcare and housing to climate and education that have left countless American families locked out and left behind. A former Peace Corps member, legal aid volunteer, and assistant district attorney, he has worked tirelessly for the people most at risk, most marginalized, and most in need. Over his four terms in the House of Representatives, Congressman Kennedy emerged as a national figure in the Democratic Party's most pivotal debates. Sitting on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, he built an impressive legislative record in a polarized Washington, spearheading bipartisan efforts to advance offshore wind energy and other forms of clean energy, extend mental health coverage for children and pregnant women, support the domestic manufacturing industry, protect consumer voices online, make hearing aids more affordable, and defend access to legal assistance for struggling families. He is currently the managing director at Citizens Energy, a nonprofit energy company founded in 1979 by his father, Joseph P. Kennedy II. Under its innovative business model, Citizens has provided millions of citizens with free or discounted heating oil, run global and national energy ventures, developed the largest low-income community solar program in the nation, and pays the heating bills of over 130 homeless shelters and food pantries across Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Congressman Kennedy serves on numerous nonprofit boards, including the Woodwell Climate Research Center down at Woods Hole, Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, and the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate. He attended Stanford University and Harvard Law School. Congressman Kennedy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kevin, thank you so much for the incredibly kind introduction. You read it just like somebody once wrote it, so thank you. But I'm so honored. I was so touched when you thought to include me today. I'm honored to be able to share a few thoughts and words with all of you. And more than anything, thanks for having us. And to the 400 people or so that are watching from whatever camera, I guess that one back there. Hi, thanks, appreciate it. Kevin, I gotta say, your leadership in this space, but so many others, has had an impact, I think, far beyond even your knowledge and reach. I had the honor and privilege of serving in Washington, obviously, when you were there assisting and helping lead the office with Secretary Moniz. Your background, how to say this the right way, Congress is good for some things. Science isn't always one of them. Your background and the credibility you and the Secretary brought to these issues, these debates, you might recall these being in a room where the debate just fell away because no one was going to debate physics with an MIT physics professor. No one was going to take on science with the head of the Union of Concerned Scientists. And it provided an extraordinary breath of fresh air to some of these debates where if there was political opposition, it would be political, it wasn't substantive. But dear God, how much we need that clarity and that substance these days. So truly, sir, thank you very, very much for your extraordinary leadership. Andy, thank you very much for hosting us, and to everybody at Northeastern University, thanks for opening the doors to us. Professor Hajar, grateful to be here with you as well, sir. To our friends from quasi-Washington, or the extended Washington, and the Biden administration, Jocelyn Brown-Saracino from DOE, and Mr. Musial from NREL, grateful to be with you both. And finally, again, to everybody in the audience, thanks for joining. An incredibly important topic and a timely topic, as you obviously know, but extraordinarily important to be able to come together in this moment and advance this issue. So I think today is a great illustration of the synergy between government, private industry, and academia to help tackle a formidable challenge of climate change through renewable technologies like offshore wind. From AI applications to structural advances in concrete bases and self-positioning turbine blades, what you all have done, and Kevin, what you referenced, advances or highlights the advances you have made that I am embarrassed to admit even my engineering degree from Stanford cannot come close to contemplating, let alone explaining. But I'm honored to have a chance to join you all today. Here in Boston, the birthplace of at least two revolutions. One, that whole American Revolution thing, and the second, a green revolution. Both were built on ideals. Both required bold action, and both encountered resistance and setbacks. And with all due respect to the royals that were here last week, that first revolution succeeded because no problem. That happens all the time, but nevertheless. That first revolution succeeded because farmers and tradesmen and mechanics refused to knuckle under to the world's leading empire. Similarly, Green Revolution will overcome the resistance to this planet's entrenched interests and the structures which abate them, whose fossil fuel profits and influence have proved a formidable stumbling block. Just last week, the achievements of Massachusetts in mounting a challenge to a fossil fuel economy were highlighted by the Earthshot Prizes, awarded by those same royals. From clipper ships to computer chips, the Bay State has been a laboratory of innovation literally for centuries. We now lead the way in developing technologies to reduce global warming and to stave off environmental devastation that threatens to swamp coastal cities, spread disease and famine, trigger resource conflicts the world over. While battling foes on a policy and political front, an offshore wind industry has found a foothold here in Massachusetts with the first major projects in the nation. And God knows we all hope that many others will follow. But as we all know, challenges in the form of permitting, funding, pricing, and community cooperation can still stand in the way of making offshore wind a scalable, sustainable, and equitable source of clean, green, renewable power. So after facing headwinds for so many years, clean energy advocates, many of you in this room, have had a lot of reasons to celebrate over this past year. And congratulations and thank you for your work. But while the advances were taking place at the state level, the federal government has finally stepped in to become full partners in that revolution. The successes that you all helped codify in the historic infrastructure investment and the Inflation Reduction Act will make a lasting contribution in the battle of climate change. But as impactful as that legislation and the corresponding funding are, our history also demonstrates that construction without consultation and collaboration can create problems just as deep as the ones that they seek to solve. In other words, while doing the right thing for the planet, we have to make sure we're doing it the right way for humanity. And that is a major challenge of this time. How do you include low-income and host communities in an energy revolution, including the development of an offshore wind industry? I'd suggest the answer is also clear. It's by making everyone a partner in the development of a 21st century energy economy. And folks, that's not just a matter of cutting a deal with local fishermen as a way of trying to reconcile green and blue, or ignoring the needs of land-based communities in the hope that offshore wind is largely out of sight and therefore out of mind. No, in order to redeem the promise that this brave new industry represents, and to do it right, we have to shape a powerful new economic sector so that it doesn't just follow the old utility model of building infrastructure here and watching profits go there. One solution to that challenge was built right here in our own backyard by Citizens Energy, that aforementioned nonprofit that Kevin discussed. It was started over 40 years ago and channels revenues from successful energy ventures to low-income programs, or to programs to help low-income families. The company was founded back in the 1970s during the energy price shocks and citizens used its model from oil and gas trading to underwrite the energy bills of millions of households across our country. Elderly and low-income families were buffeted by skyrocketing prices triggered by war and unrest, were freezing in their homes, while big oil collected billions of windfall profits. Folks, in the words of Mark Twain, history sure does seem to rhyme. 40 years later, we are still channeling those profits from those successful business ventures into charitable programs like the 131 homeless shelters and food pantries we still serve. And this time, we're doing it through a variety of different innovative solutions that expand access to renewable power. In the early 2000s, citizens began working with San Diego Gas and Electric to build a $2 billion transmission project called the Sunrise Power Link, a high-voltage transmission line to carry solar, wind, and geothermal power from the Imperial Valley, east of San Diego, to the major load center in San Diego. Our participation in that project hinged on using our profits to benefit low-income residents of the Imperial Valley, the poorest, amongst the poorest in the entire state of California, all without adding a single cent to ratepayers. Our approach actually helped build the support for the project while serving to foreshadow a number of the EJ40 mandates that have now become part of federal energy policy. We initially used profits of about $1.5 million a year to install solar panels free of charge on rooftops of low-income ratepayers. Our work at building utility-scale arrays in other parts of the country, though, led us to taking on an even broader approach to spreading benefits of the project. We built a 35-megawatt low-income community solar farm, the largest in the country, in partnership with the Imperial Irrigation District, the Valley's municipal utility, and now use the profits from that Sunrise Power Link to lower the cost of solar energy to over 12,000 low-income households, each of whom will save over $500 a year for over 20 years. That means that it means an awful lot, in the high desert in Southern California, where electricity bills soar as temperatures can reach 115 degrees in the height of summer. San Diego gets the electricity that they need. Low-income families get the relief that they deserve. So we pioneered the model of using energy infrastructure profits to make local communities stakeholders and shareholders in those projects. Regular working families have a seat at the table, rather than just investors and energy executives who have long been the stated beneficiaries. We then partnered with San Diego Gas and Electric on another line that's currently channeling profits to provide electric vehicles to healthcare centers, serving Native American tribes in San Diego County, and buying electric vehicles for other worthy nonprofits like Meals on Wheels. Like our solar and transmission projects, there is absolutely no reason why offshore wind farms cannot expand the circle of stakeholders to include communities that have been left out in the past. And not just left out of wind projects, but also the transmission lines necessary to carry that energy to market. The days when working class communities could be torn apart to make way for big power plants or highways or transmission corridors are long gone. The days when they are left out of the equation for energy infrastructure development in general are equally past. So if we aim to build a cleaner, greener, and more equitable future, we have to aim to build it for all. Keeping that promise means that we should never build infrastructure investment or energy infrastructure investment the same way again. Our siloed regional electric grids are crippling our ability to scale renewables. Consumers are saying enough to distant investors profiting off of skyrocketing rates. You all in this room, you've already picked the right side of history. You're driving it. Now, we also have to make sure that we pick the right side of humanity. NREL estimates that investments in the wind energy sector could reach as much as $70 billion by 2050, annually by 2050, at which point the industry would support over 600,000 jobs. This is a huge future for our economy. And imagine what else it could be. Right now, there are hundreds of millions of dollars on the table to go conquer the adversaries of an offshore wind industry. So by all means, let's go get it. But we can't forget those social barriers as well, the ones for working families and rural communities. The money behind a greener, cleaner future also backs a more equitable one as well. The work you all are doing every single day draws from the same spirit of those Earthshot prizes handed out last week, which themselves look back several generations to the Moonshot Challenge offered by President Kennedy to put a man on the moon within the decade in the 1960s. America accepted that challenge, as he said, and I'll spare you my attempt at the accent, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. Achieving it was thought to be impossible. But 450,000 people across 20,000 different organizations came together to make the impossible possible. Your work is not just hard, it's necessary. When President Kennedy made that moonshot speech at Rice University, he told the world, quote, "We set sail in this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained, new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people." That is our mission, and that's your charge. Thank you so, so much for all that you do to help make this green revolution possible for all of us. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Congressman Kennedy. Thank you for your exceptional leadership and for that message to this group. It's a great way to kick us off. I now have the great pleasure to introduce our next keynote speaker, Jocelyn Brown-Saracino, the offshore wind energy lead at the U.S. Department of Energy. Jocelyn has been with DOE for close to 13 years. In her role as offshore wind energy lead, Jocelyn works to advance offshore wind efforts across the department in close coordination with agencies across the government. If you want to get anything done in the offshore wind space, you need to know Jocelyn. There are certain people in any organization, certainly in a federal agency, who are a catalyst and a connective tissue and a problem solver. And Jocelyn epitomizes that type of person that we need to make these organizations function and flourish. Jocelyn contributed to the establishment of the Joint Agency 30 gigawatts by 2030 goal and is leading DOE's efforts to implement that goal. This includes overseeing the initiation of DOE's Atlantic Transmission Analysis and joint convening efforts with BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, I think most of you know, contributing to the establishment of the White House-led federal-state offshore wind partnership focused on supply chain coordination, leading the department's offshore wind strategic planning efforts, and leading the establishment of the new floating offshore wind, Windshot. Prior to assuming her current role, Jocelyn served as program manager for DOE's wind energy, environmental siting, workforce development, and grid portfolio, and managed the department's wind, ocean energy, and hydropower environmental research portfolios. She came to the U.S. Department of Energy through the NOAA Sea Grant, John A. Naus Marine Policy Fellowship Program. She holds a master's degree in marine science from the University of New England and a bachelor's degree in biological sciences from Smith College. And I'll slightly steal her thunder. She is a proud daughter of the great state of Massachusetts. Please welcome Jocelyn.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction, Kevin, and thanks for your leadership and stewardship of the consortium over the last 6 months. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I really want to thank the National Offshore Wind R&D Consortium for the opportunity to be here at the Department of Energy, we're immensely proud of the work that the consortium is doing and all that it has accomplished to date. And we're also really grateful for the leadership that NYSERDA has shown in the establishment and stewardship of the consortium, the partnership of a broad number of states that have been part of funding the effort, and the commitment of the consortium's private and public sector partners. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation, the talks over the next 2 days, and the broader information sharing and dialogue that's going to happen over the course of this full week here at Northeastern. As Kevin was saying, I'm really pleased to be here today in my home state of Massachusetts, which, as Joe Kennedy was mentioning, is proudly the birthplace of the offshore wind industry here in the United States and home to the first commercial offshore wind farm. Last year, I had the pleasure of speaking at the Symposium when we were all online, and there I spoke of some of the key challenges that we really need to address as a nation to advance offshore wind. I spoke of the need to advance future leasing, to build a robust domestic supply chain, to address transmission constraints, and to ensure that offshore wind is able to coexist alongside ocean users and marine wildlife. And today, I wanted to take some time to reflect back on the progress we've made, both as we look back over the year since this last event, but also as we look back over the arc of offshore wind planning and development in the United States to date. And Kevin mentioned that I've been working at the U.S. Department of Energy and offshore wind for the last 13 years. But my experience with offshore wind really started working during summers in the early 2000s, not too far from here at Mass Audubon on Cape Cod. And during that period, both the communities in that area, the state, the region, and the nation were really considering the first proposed offshore wind project in the United States. And as we sit here today, I think it's powerful to look back at the progress we've made, both in that longer term, but also in the more immediate term. At the federal level, over the last 2 years, the United States has made strong commitments to advancing offshore wind in the United States, with the establishment of our 30 gigawatt target, our support for advancing leadership in floating offshore wind, and the historic strides that we've made in this country with respect to offshore wind leasing. As of May of last year, the offshore wind development pipeline in the United States was at 40 gigawatts in various stages of development, and since that time, it's grown further still. And of course, as we sit here today, our eyes we're here, but our eyes are also pointed west as BOEM is set to hold its first ever commercial scale auction for floating offshore wind here in the United States off of the coast of California. And that sale will help the Department of Energy on its path to meeting its newly announced deployment goal for floating offshore wind of 15 gigawatts by 2035, as part of the broader federal effort to really advance floating offshore wind in the United States alongside fixed bottom technologies. And of course, it almost goes without saying, but it absolutely should be said, that the history of offshore wind in the United States really has been shaped by state leadership. And at the point of publication of this year's DOE offshore wind market report, states had committed to 39 gigawatts of offshore wind in the United States, with close to 18 gigawatts in offshore wind power procured. And among other recent notable announcements or accomplishments, this year marks the historic first in California's ambitious offshore wind commitments, for California's commitments for floating offshore wind. And it is no secret to anybody in this room that the United States has a huge offshore wind resource for both fixed bottom and floating technologies. And if we capture even a small percentage of that resource, we could power tens of millions of American homes and businesses with clean and reliable energy. And the Biden administration has set really ambitious clean energy goals for the United States to put us on an irreversible path to 100% clean energy economy with net zero emissions no later than 2050. And domestic offshore wind is really set to be a key player in our clean energy portfolio. So last year at this event, I spoke of the need to resolve transmission challenges in order to ensure that the United States, offshore wind can be a key part of meeting those decarbonization goals. And while there's still significant work to be done in this space, over the last year, we've seen really important progress in this direction. At the state level, we saw New Jersey's announcements with respect to their state agreement approach and their anticipated future steps. We saw New York's Mesh Ready requirements published. We saw New England's infrastructure initiative with its associated request for information about shared investment in potential offshore wind transmission. And at the federal level, we're really working hard to try to usher in solutions, transmission solutions through convening, through analyses, through R&D, and funding to increase transmission resilience, and also to build out transmission infrastructure. This last winter, the U.S. Department of Energy initiated a Building a Better Grid initiative to help catalyze transmission development and investments in the distribution system. And through that effort, the U.S. Department of Energy is working with both the White House and our partners at the Department of the Interior and others on a plan to address offshore wind transmission challenges on the Atlantic that are informed both by a series of convenings with stakeholders and interregional analyses. With $100 million in new funding through the Inflation Reduction Act for offshore wind transmission and interregional transmission convenings and analysis, we're also really well positioned to expand that work to future regions moving forward. We're also working really hard to help support the R&D that's needed to address transmission challenges. And you're going to be hearing about some of the critical work that the Consortium is supporting in this regard over the course of the next couple days. And also, with an eye to ensuring that we are enabling long-distance transmission solutions in the future, DOE recently published a notice of intent for $10 million in funding for HVDC standards, controls, and workforce development work. And so if that's an area of interest for you, I'd encourage you to check that out. And excitingly, just this last month, the U.S. Department of Energy announced that $13 billion in new financing opportunities will be available over the next coming years for expansion and modernization of our electrical grid, including $2.5 billion for the Transmission Facilitation Program and $4 billion for funding for grid resilience efforts. And those concept paper due dates are coming up quickly, so again, if that's an area of interest for you, I'd encourage you to check that out. So with respect to transmission, as we look to the year to come, I'm really looking forward to a year of growth and expansion as these funding announcements result in awards, as we publish our action plan for transmission development on the East Coast, and we look to expand into other regions. But of course, transmission development alone, while vitally important, will not be enough to ensure we catalyze the development of offshore wind development in the United States. And last year, I spoke of the work that we need to do to support the development of a robust domestic supply chain that will create jobs and pave the way for deployment at scale. And here too, if we look back over the last year, we've made enormous progress in this regard. And that includes intelligent planning based on sound analysis with the release of an NREL workforce development analysis. And as part of the effort to really chart a path forward with respect to offshore wind supply chain development, we're going to be hearing over the course of the next couple days about the Consortium's national supply chain roadmap that will be released soon. And I think that this study is really going to mark an important step for the United States in our planning efforts, really helping us chart a course for meeting our supply chain ambitions by 2030. And recently, the U.S. Department of Energy released its first ever wind-related prize, the Floating Offshore Wind Readiness Prize, which aims to advance the manufacturing of floating offshore wind platforms, to decrease cost, increase throughput, and really try to maximize domestic manufacturing capabilities. And here too, if you haven't already checked if this prize is something that might be interesting to you and you haven't checked it out, you've got until January 13th to register for that prize, so I'd encourage you to check it out. And with respect to supply chain, last but certainly not least, with both the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, the federal agencies are really armed with a new suite of resources to help support supply chain development, with resources such as $450 million at the Department of Transportation for port infrastructure upgrades, and approximately $100 billion in new loan authority through DOE's Loan Program Office. So as we heard Joe Kennedy talk really articulately about, I think it's also really important to focus on both as we're thinking about the development of offshore wind projects, but also as we think about the development of associated supply chain development and infrastructure, that we need to be developing with an eye to environmental justice and environmental sustainability. And BOEM and their sister permitting agencies are really leading here, and DOE has a supportive role to play with respect to supporting sound science and stakeholder engagement. And we're going to be hearing about really important work that's supported by the consortium over the next couple days. And I also want to mention that the U.S. Department of Energy has a notice of intent for $7 million in social science research to help us advance our understanding of offshore wind development on communities. And so, again, if that's something that's interest of you, I'd encourage you to check that out and keep your eye out for an upcoming solicitation. So last, but certainly not least, we really need to work collaboratively to ensure that offshore wind continues to be cost competitive. Last year, I spoke about the need to fund critical technology R&D that will help catalyze continued reductions in industry-wide. And I think we're all aware the history of offshore wind development around the world has really been marked by rapid cost reductions, and that's been spurred in large part through technical innovation. But around the world, I think we're all aware that energy sectors are grappling with supply chain challenges and increasing costs. And that context makes the work that each of you are doing around this room all the more important. And at the Department of Energy, we're dedicated to continuing to support work in this space. And we had some exciting announcements this fall, including the establishment of with our partners at Interior Commerce and Transportation, of a new floating offshore wind shot, which really is seeking to drive floating offshore wind development in the United States. And that shot sets a very audacious goal of reducing the cost of floating offshore wind by 70% by 2035. And I think it's important to emphasize when talking about that is an ambitious goal that will require an all-hands-on-deck Earthshot scale effort, and that does not represent a business-as-usual case. It's going to require expanded and concerted R&D on the part of all of us assembled here, and it's going to require more than that. It's going to require future leasing actions, transmission infrastructure, supply chain maturity, and the readiness of U.S. infrastructure, including ports. And so we're eager to partner with all of you as we look to grow our shot portfolio and advance coordinated efforts on all of those fronts. So in closing, we've made remarkable progress of late, building off of foundational work over the last 2 decades in this country and leveraging decades of international experience to ensure that we have the knowledge base to advance offshore wind both at home and abroad. But there is much more to do to go from 42 megawatts of installed capacity today to realizing our 2030 ambitions, but also to ensure that 2030 and 30 gigawatts is not seen as an end goal, but instead we're using it for planning purposes as a stepping stone to 110 gigawatts or more by 2050. And getting there will take expertise, it'll take passion, innovation, creative thinking, and diligent planning from all of those assembled and more. It will take a commitment to engaging with communities, a commitment to developing with environmental justice at its core. And at the U.S. Department of Energy, we're eager to collaborate with all of you as we work collectively to usher in a clean energy future in which the sustainable and just development of offshore wind is a vital part of our coastal economies and our clean energy futures. And thank you again for having me here today. I'm looking forward to the next 2 days, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you moving forward.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. That was terrific. So I'm not going to do a flowery introduction of our symposium chair, Walt Musial. Most of you know him. He is the offshore wind platform lead, principal engineer at NREL. He is our symposium chair. I'm also going to do something that Corey had asked me to do when I finished, which is hit escape and go back to that. Sorry, Corey.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Pleasure to be here today, and I need to do something Corey taught me as well, which is start my presentation. Let's see if I can. Oh, and I need to go. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Walt Musial, as Kevin said, and it's been a pleasure working with the team so far. I started this in this role in 2018 before the contract was awarded to NYSERDA, and I've worked through the NYSERDA team, and then with Carrie Hitt, who's a pleasure to work with, and then and seamlessly Kevin has taken over, and it's been great working with the new team now too. So thanks for putting up with me, and I look forward to the next phase. Kevin just announced that they will be selecting a new executive director of the consortium in the next week. Did you say? On Friday. So we look forward to that, and we're eager to hear who it is. It sounds, I'm very excited to hear that. I also want to thank Jerry and Andy for hosting us here at Northeastern. A lot of you know me as NREL. I've been at NREL for 34 years, but I have my roots here in Massachusetts. My father graduated Northeastern in 1952. And I took my first wind engineering class at UMass Amherst in 1979. So I've wandered away, but I'm back. And so I just wanted to plug that for one. And then just really, this is just kind of the dashboard of what Jocelyn was saying. You know, we've come a long way. We've got a serious new market, and it's centered here in Massachusetts. We have targets for 30 gigawatts. We have about 40 megawatts of policy commitments from states, about 40 gigawatts of projects in the pipeline, and that, as Jocelyn said, that's growing. We've just announced new wind energy areas, so that will make that number get bigger. 24 offtake agreements need more megawatts in the water, so we need to start building a lot of these systems. I want to just talk about the roadmaps a little bit, and these are the driving documents that we use to set the research agenda for the consortium. And I can tell you, when we started this in 2018, which wasn't that long ago, we thought we had a roadmap, and we thought we knew what the research needs were, but it changes all the time, as you know. And so this consortium, one of the great things about it is it's nimble and it's flexible, and it can adapt to those changes. So every year, or every solicitation at least, there's a new roadmap that comes out, and we take input from you all and the group out there, the greater board and R&D committees, and we feed that into the new versions. So we're working on a new version right now, and that version will serve to address the research needs and the agenda for the next solicitations as they come through. So one of the things that's changed, and I really want to point this out because I think it needs to be emphasized over and over again, is that the magnitude of the problem is growing. And I know you can't read this slide, but this slide was taken from a report that was done at NREL just this summer on what it would take to get to 100% clean energy and to meet the Biden administration goals that necessitate that we decarbonize by 2050, let's say. And this slide is showing multiple scenarios, and there were multiple more beyond this. But the big point is, ignore the extra significant figures. The grid needs to grow by a factor of 3 in order to decarbonize and do what we need to do. And the magnitude of the development of offshore wind and other renewable energy sources is far bigger than I think we all thought it was a few years ago. In almost every one of these scenarios, it says we need about 1,200 gigawatts of wind in the United States. That didn't break it down by whether it was offshore wind or onshore wind. But we've done scenarios and strategies in the past, and if offshore wind were 20% of that total, it still means we're talking about 300 gigawatts of offshore wind, not 100 gigawatts. And I'm not setting policy. I'm just reading the facts off this chart right here. And if so no matter which scenario you look at, you're talking about a huge amount of wind. So we got 140 gigawatts installed so far in the country. Only 42, like 0.042 is offshore wind. Offshore wind needs to play a major role in achieving that goal. And I don't think, because of the inertia that it takes to get an industry like this going, I don't think we can build too much or go too fast. So that's one thing I wanted to just say. So market scale is important. I think we need to get going on this. The question is, do we need larger turbines? And a lot of people say we do, but I think that every time we go to a larger machine, we have to start a new process of R&D, and we have to start over again, and it takes time, and it can delay things. So I think we need to give that a really hard look. When I did some analysis on what the land-based industry did since 2009, that's only 13 years, they were able to achieve the same kind of cost reductions in land-based as what Jocelyn was saying we need to do for floating offshore wind in the same time frame. So it can be done, and it can be done through this industrialization, commercialization, and innovation. And we're all playing a part in that. The consortium is playing a huge part in that broad breadth of near-term development. We focus on U.S. projects. We focus on what the industry needs. We focus near-term and medium-term projects that can be delivered to groups that aren't necessarily able to secure funding in other ways, because it's small businesses and academia that generally can apply for these, and it's a fast turnaround. It's much faster than maybe some of the government programs. So it has a niche and has a big role to play, and I'm proud to be a part of the consortium. The roadmap, which is in progress, we'll be publishing it in the next month or so, I think, it follows along the lines of really 3 pillars that we have defined. One is the technology development. The second is the resource and the site characterizations. And the third is the kind of balance of station, if you will, the installation, the O&M, the supply chain issues. And so it breaks down into critical issues where, and these are some of the things we're looking at right now, adapting to the new scale, which the industry is committed to 15 megawatts. Let's make those turbines work. Let's make them cheap. and we have a lot to do to integrate those turbines into the infrastructure that's being built right now and into the platforms and service and everything that needs to go with that. There's also new areas that we have to expand to. If we're going to hit some of these targets, we can't just be putting turbines in the Northeast. I want to, Northeast is the leader, but we have to go everywhere where there's windy oceans. So we're working on those territories as well. We need to validate all the models. We need to validate our resource assessments. We need to get going on developing strategies so we can keep the labor force from being overly exposed to the hazards of at-sea maintenance, so we can automate a lot of that stuff and spend a lot more time looking at remote sensing and diagnostics. These are the kinds of things we're going to write up, and we're happy to take your input on that. So I'm going to just talk about we have the agenda. I think do you want me to go, I can go through, I think I'll go do the logistics first and then hit the agenda at the end. So I was given a list of things that that you probably already know, but I just want to remind you. So the Wi-Fi access information was already sent to you. Everybody should have it. If you don't have it or you can't figure that out, please see Corey. She can help you with that. The symposium agenda is also sent out, and you should have that. There's many ways to get it. It was sent to your email, and there's also QR codes and other places we can get you there. But it's, we're a small group. You can find it. If you're online, you can probably navigate to it as well. The sessions will be upstairs. There's 2 rooms for that. We're doing Q&A all online and on our computers and phones. There's no microphones to do Q&A with, so it'll be conducted on Slido. And so you should have that app, and you can download it. So no microphones. Today's events are taking place here. We're in the Curry Student Center in Northeastern University in Massachusetts. So that's, and I just said that the 3rd floor is where the other sessions will be breaking out into. Did I get that right? Yeah. So looking at Jerry. Tomorrow's events will kick off in the morning in the Cabral Center in the O'Brien African American Institute. And that's here on campus as well, right? Right. 5 minutes from here on. If you're online, you don't care. But these guys do. This will be the main headquarters for tomorrow, with additional tracks taking place in the Egan Research Center. Tomorrow, then we'll also close the symposium with joint networking reception co-hosted by us, that means NOWRDC, as well as ASME and the conference that's happening after this, which is IOWTC, which stands for the International Offshore Wind Technology Conference, I think. Technical conference, okay. And that's also here in Boston. Also here, okay. Thank you I didn't know that they were co-located. So, okay, so that's an important point. And so it's going to be a big week for you guys. And I hope, I think I will probably miss that one because it's just getting there, but I hope that everything goes well. So for today, the agenda is, there's really 2 parallel sessions. The first 2 we're going to start almost right after this. One is improving the state-of-the-art wind resource and site characterization. And then the other one is developing a U.S. offshore wind supply chain. So those will be in parallel. We'll take a break. Then the 2 more sessions will begin facilitating ocean area coexistence, an industry workshop that's going to be hosted, I know, by Amy Robertson on modeling needs for offshore wind design. She's my boss at NREL, and she's going to be conducting this session, which will be exploring ways to continue this amazing IEA task that's been going on since 2005, almost 17 years, which is the Offshore Wind Codes Comparison Collaborative, and it's like 4th incarnation. So if you're interested, attend that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. What's next, Kevin? We're going for a break, or is it? And we're going to the sessions. Thank you.